I've seen a flying saucer.
You've seen one?
Yes,
Where was this?
definitely.
Unidentified aerial phenomena.
To cover up our mistakes.
I've met people who swear they've seen Bigfoot.
Join us for a journey into the obscure.
You are now listening to The Wow Pod.
All right, welcome to the show.
Welcome
to
the show.
Yeah, today we have David Emmons on. And Dave is a man who has some experiences with UFOs, and he's going to tell us about some of those experiences today.
If you could first, Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
Yeah.
How did you come to this?
Okay. Right. I grew up in Illinois, southern Illinois, right across the big Mississippi from St. Louis. And matter of fact, it's where I saw all 5 of my up-close UFOs. And Illinois is getting a reputation of being a UFO state. It has been Texas and California. Of course, they're still up there, but Illinois is starting to rank, and I've seen all 5 of mine in Illinois. I grew up, graduated from high school. I'm a little bit older than you guys. 1963 is when I saw my first UFO, but I was in school for journalism. I was in the military, had a top secret, got out of that because I didn't like the pressure. I was only 19, about ready to turn 20, and I didn't like military intelligence, nor did I like having the idea of going underground in Sandia, New Mexico. So that scared me as a young guy, but I was just grateful that I got into that class as an elite class, nuclear weapons, and I was the only one with a high school education, myself and another guy. The rest of them had masters. So I tested into the program, but I didn't like it, got out of it. And they said, well, you probably end up in Vietnam. So that's where I went. I was a platoon sergeant there. And then when I got out, I was about ready to get out of the military on my contract. And they asked me to be a lieutenant. I said, no, I'm turning it down. So I got a field commission in less than 3 years. So I did well, but I didn't like that nuclear weapons thing. But liking the Vietnam battle, that's not, no, I don't like that better, but I didn't have a choice. But I got out after that. I worked as an electrician. I was a musician for about 45 years. I still do play a little bit. And I've been going to school part-time, playing music and working. And I got to journalism is my I guess my major subject in college. I went to 2 different colleges and one special trade school for journalism, Broadcast Center in St. Louis. And so that's what got me into the journalism thing, keeping notes, taking pictures. So I got into that pretty much. Then I managed my own business, a couple of them. I managed somebody else's businesses a couple of times. And then I worked as a lead man in a refinery, a supervisor. And so I settled in there because it gave me good pay and also give me good dinosaur benefits. So I didn't go anywhere else, but I also worked in Chicago as a field coordinator. So I've had a varied and a real, I guess you could say, rewardable the background and career. I worked with the Red Cross for some time. I was a disaster manager with them for a while. So yeah, I've seen and done a little bit of everything. So, but I've seen and I've done too many UFOs to be just an isolated incident to one person. Seeing 5 up close UFOs is not common for anybody. So
you've seen 5 UFOs?
Yes, up close.
Okay. I've
seen plenty of orbs, the bright orbs. I've seen lots of those. I don't count orbs. If I can't see the shape of the ship, or if I can't be within at least 300 feet of the ship and see what it looks like, I don't really count it. But there's 5 of them that I did see close up.
When was your first encounter?
Okay, the first one, we'll get started on that. The first one happened in 1963. That's going to date me. And it was with a good friend of mine who we still talk about it to this day at parties. We'll bring up the UFO sighting. happened this one summer evening. We were out of school. We were sitting on the steps close to my buddy's dad where he lived, and he lived there in the apartment with him. And we were sitting outside, 10:30 at night, drinking sodas, Pepsi from glass bottles. That dates me too. And then also a 10 transistor radio. So that was the popular thing for kids, that little radio and drinking Pepsi Cola. But we were doing that, and we heard the radio have some static on it. And I asked him, I said, "Did you change batteries in that radio?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what's wrong with it?" And then we smelled something that smelled like ozone. Well, it was actually smelled like sulfur. And then I found out it was ozone later on, because when an object comes into our atmosphere, comes through, it picks up carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and it picks up nitrogen and oxygen. And when those all get together, it'll kind of smolder a little bit, and it makes a smell. And that's ozone smell. That's like a sulfur smell. Ozone is not quite as strong as direct sulfur like this ship had on it. Well, we went up to the road. We walked up the steps, went up to the road, and he grabbed the flashlight, my friend did, out of his dad's truck. He started flashing this flashlight at it. This object was moving about 60 feet above the ground. Is really low, coming through the neighborhood, and it had two bright little lights on it. And then it had a little red light towards the top. We followed it. Well, when we got up to this empty lot, we saw the shape of it. It was right over my backyard, like I said, about 60 feet or so up, and it was shaped like a disc, a little. I don't know if you know these old time discs where you take and pump them and they spin around. They're kind of chubby looking or kind of thick looking. Yeah. This one looked a little thick looking. It wasn't the streamline cigar shape or anything. This was kind of a chubby looking thing.
A little taller.
Yeah, it was about I'd say 12, 14 feet tall, and about maybe 30 feet wide. And at the second row, the first row, of course, underneath of it was dark, and it was black. That's all we could see. And then the second row, the little tires, like you can just imagine putting three tires stacked on top of each other, smaller and going up. Well, the second row had portals, had windows. I was concentrating on those windows, and I said to myself, I hope they don't look out. I said, that scared me to see what they look like. And my friend just stood there, and he looked, and we pinched each other to make sure we were seeing what we were seeing. And on top of this thing, the top little bubble had two antennae. I'm almost sure they were antennae. And that must be how they communicate, probably in a frequency we don't understand, the reason why we can't get into their frequencies. But that told me that there has to be some kind of communication that comes to those antennae. So we stood there for a while, and we kept saying, "Can't believe what we're seeing. Can't believe." We were kind of like in shock. We're used to going to the movies and seeing these men from Mars back in the 50s and early 60s with these movies that would kill people and have wars, Battle of the Worlds, and so we were afraid that we was going to be, shot with some kind of ray gun. We stood there in fear, but at 10:30, it seemed. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're okay.
Yeah, but we were thinking that okay, this thing's going to get us or whatever. And at 10:30, apparently it probably did get us, because we had lost time between 10:30 and about midnight. And neither one of us can figure out where that hour or so went, because when I got home after the UFO incident, after I got home, I saw that there was the ship had actually left to the west, and I'll get back to that. But I was getting to the door, and my mom unlocked it. She looked at me. She said, "Where have you been?" I said, "We saw a UFO."
So you were in trouble twice. First,
yeah.
And then your mom was there.
Right. But come to find out, through the years, she also had, she's seen UFOs. And that's why she warned us not to go around flying saucers. Because
we find that common, that a lot of people who have experiences through their family lines.
Right. We don't know. Those are all theories. There's been theories about Native American blood also. I do have a little bit of that in me. I got a little bit of Crow Indian in me, and my family does too. We don't know if it's that. There's been all kinds of theories like, why me? You know, a lot of abductees ask why me. But we couldn't figure out, like I said, what happened that hour and a half. Uh, but when I went back and took a look, I drove back. This has been some years back. I drove back up to that lot, and I took a look. The craft was in the southwest as we were looking to the southwest. And when it took off due west. So there's something like 30 or 40 degrees change in where it was located, and we didn't notice it move. So something tells me that that was first indication that we might have been abducted.
Mm. Do you have any memories of being taken on?
Yes, I have one memory that was regressed to me. I was on this metal table, and I was trying to put on a shirt, and it was too tight for me. My buddy was a little smaller than me, and I was a little more chubbier than him, so the shirt didn't fit. And I remember I was real groggy trying to put it on, and I couldn't put it on. But apparently they must have, give us back the right clothes, and we ended up standing in a position where we were at. That's the regression I have of that. But like I told you a while ago, I do things in a journalistic fashion. I have notes. I have a ledger about 260 pages, and everything's kept in there. Everything that's happened to me, either by UFO or paranormal. A lot of people want to call UFO paranormal. I don't like that. I like to separate the two because I believe the UFO has been proven to be, they exist. But one of the things that I always have to have a following fact, like something has to come along and tell me, yes, this happened. Well, something did about 3-4 weeks later. And this is kind of like, hard to talk about, but I have to come out and say it. But it was in my groin, it was in my left testicle area, and there was a little bump there, and I felt it, and I was only 14 at the time, and I felt it, and I thought something's there, and then I looked a little closer, and there's a little red line, a real thin red line, about the size of thread, and it was really bright red, and I thought, well, that's a hole, and so I pushed it back out the hole that was cut for this thing. So I pushed it back out, took a little while, and I squeezed it out that hole. And then I had it in my hand. It looked ash color, kind of a light ash color. And then as I held it out for a while, it started getting darker and darker. It was deteriorating when it hit oxygen or the air, whatever. And I think that's the way they make them. If they come out of the body, then they quickly kind of disintegrate. But I showed it to my mom, and she said, "That's an ingrown blackhead." So I said, "No, it's not, Mom. It's too big. Look at it." And she goes, "Oh, just throw it away anyway." And I said, "Mom, there was a hole cut for it." See, I was old enough to know that what I observed, I saw that little hole was cut for it. And I said, something just wasn't right. Something put that in there, I told my mom. She looked at me like she had a little bit of fear about her, but she didn't want to. She did want to talk about the subject. Back in the old school, they didn't like talking about things because they're afraid to scare the kids even more. So she didn't want to go along with the story because she didn't want me to be afraid that they're going to come back and do something more. So I can understand her feelings at that point. But that was the secondary fact. The regression didn't happen until years after that, actually. Sometimes it takes some time for a regression to come back and hit you in your deep sleep, and they're very vivid when they do come back. So that was the only regression I had. My buddy, he hasn't had any regression. He hasn't seen anything except little orbs, but he was also chief of police, and then he was security for Boeing, so he couldn't talk about UFOs. Because of his security clearance, that sort of thing. So he didn't talk about it. He doesn't even like joining my page on Facebook because I got a lot of UFO shows and programs that I have on my Facebook, and he didn't want to join that because of his job, his security clearance.
Yeah,
So,
I can understand that.
so aside from the implant, did you have anything else physically, like any other physical symptoms following this?
Well, I remember after we stood there for a while and then the ship left, we were still kind of in a daze. It's kind of what they do is they dumb you down. I use that terminology quite a bit because it's happened to me several times. And we felt a little dumbed down, and we looked at each other, and we just kind of, it was in slow motion, like, and we took off to our individual homes. Yeah, I didn't I didn't really feel anything after that. And I was asked also, did I have marks on me? No, only just the testicle area. And well, as a kid, when you played like we did, we didn't have computers, we didn't have all this other stuff. We played in the woods, and we'd always get scrapes and scratches and bruises. So we couldn't tell that from a UFO mark, ET mark or not. So there probably was marks, but I probably didn't notice it because of all the blackberry bush thorns and things like that. So yeah, it'd be hard to pick up at that age at 14.
Mm.
Sure.
I wonder what they would have been, what the purpose of that device would have been. Would it have been something that maybe measured your life cycle, or?
Well,
Tracking.
tracking is one of the items. The other two
That's an odd place to put a tracking device,
right. Well, this was actually for DNA manipulation. They were probably my DNA has probably been manipulated
They
from
were trying
these.
to do something to your semen to change that. So they weren't changing you; they were trying to change your offspring.
Right. That's DNA manipulation or tracking, but they put tracking devices anywhere. They put them deep in your ear. They can put them in your neck. They put them, I guess, around your head, under your scalp. They put them anywhere. I had another implant in my left leg, my calf, and that happened in 2011 when I found that. So that was another implant. I got pictures of that one. So at 14, I didn't have a camera, but I've got plenty of pictures of this implant. It dissolved. I kept it in a plastic bag, and it slowly dissolved after about 3 weeks.
We had an interview with another abductee that they found her implant at the base of her skull, and so they weren't able to remove it.
Yeah, it was
it was too sensitive.
Too close.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that too. Well, for a guy, I guess being in his groin area, that's kind of sensitive too.
Yeah,
that's a bit sensitive.
Yeah. But
well, and not a place that you would readily check, I wouldn't imagine.
Yeah,
you see your arms all the time.
I don't know.
Your legs all the time.
Boy probably checks that place.
Well, yeah, see how you're coming along. But no, but that was a fact, a backup fact. But after that, I'd spent, I guess, 25 years in the military. I graduated from high school on the honor roll. So I'm not a dumb kid. They couldn't kick me out of high school. I skipped school with some friends, and the counselor told me that he couldn't kick me out because I had such a high IQ. So I got the idea, oh, wow, I need to stay in school and get this thing going. So after high school, of course, we grew up poor, and I didn't have any plans for college. I could have played football and got a scholarship, and I didn't do that because I'd rather play music with my buddies. So that happened then too. But I went to the military. I worked for about 9 months, 10 months. Then I went to the military, worked in a steel mill and a flour mill, factory job when I was 18 to almost 19 when I went in the military. And I went in the military 3 years, and I just told you about that background. So I got out of the military. I went back being an electrician, went to school, and I played music about 3 nights a week. Until I passed out one morning, and the doctor said I was overworking myself, that's unusual for a young person to be overworking themselves, especially nowadays. But yeah, I did that. So I didn't have time to think about visitations or seeing. I saw orbs all my life. I'd see orbs at a distance, and I'd look up and I'd think, is that one of them? Once you see one, you think, wow, you're really looking at these things. You're always looking up because you're curious to find out what are these things, what do they want, and what are they doing with me. But I think the next experience I had was in 1996. Now, mind you, I have a list of smaller things that happened during that time. I actually had some insight of being able to predict the future, and I saw things that happen in the future, and I listed some of them. But that's something I think when I got hit by the energy and by the ETs, what they did to us, manipulation, I think that increases your awareness, or your third eye, could we say. That's what helps increase that. Yeah.
It would, because it shifts your paradigm so drastically that now you notice everything.
Right.
Well, if they're doing DNA tests or doing DNA manipulation on you, that could also do it also. Because if they're implanting some of their DNA, we don't know what they're
capable of.
Yeah, mental capabilities are.
Well, I think they was preparing me for semen samples through the years, and I noticed there was one time I have a date written down. It happened in the 90s, and I don't know exactly what year, but I do know the year that I saw the little green guys, 1996. That story is, I was sleeping one night with my ex-wife. She had the place really dark because that's how she had to have it to get a good sleep. In walks something across the mirror, and I saw the shadow in the mirror. And I thought to myself, what is this? I thought it was my adopted daughter. She was coming in order to get maybe some aspirins for a headache in our medicine cabinet. So I thought it was her, and I called out her name a couple of times. It's about 1:30 in the morning. And I had my head in my hand. I looked up at her, and I thought it was her, but she didn't answer. And then this thing walks around the corner of the bed and walks up to me. And what he did, he stood there. He's about 3.5 feet tall. He had big eyes, but he didn't have the black lenses on. Apparently, I guess it was dark enough where they didn't have the dark lenses. Maybe they have the lenses for controlling brightness. They're probably not from or something messes up their mechanisms if it's too bright. I think the little green guys are biomechanical, and I think they're little workers for the tall whites, and then actually the taller grays, and that type of thing. There's a list of them. They've listed about 7 of them that's working with us and the government, but there's also something like 57, I think, alien species that have visited this planet, from what a lot of the people are saying, but I'm not sure about that. But when I turned and looked, I put my chin in my other hand, my left hand. I looked at this thing coming up to me, the side of the bed, and I saw it. It was kind of a dark gray, green, had a green kind of a flare to it, it had the big eyes, like I told you. I could see the whites of the eyes. And the eyes were about twice our size, about twice the size of ours, except this little thing didn't look like what you see on TV, the real smooth skin, grays. This one had a lot of wrinkles. I don't know why it had so many wrinkles, but the face was really wrinkled. And I looked at it and said, wow, that scared me. For about 5 or 6 seconds, it scared me. And then all of a sudden I went out. I don't remember anything after that. I believe this little guy was actually taking DNA samples and maybe semen samples. I don't know, because I was out. And so I got up. I don't know what time it was. I didn't. Sometimes when you get involved in these situations, the electromagnetic energy kind of dumbs you down to the point where you're in a daze. You're in a sleepy type daze. And you don't really check for details. do you check for
Were
time?
eyes like ours, like it had the iris and the pupil and all
Yeah,
that?
right. It did, but they were twice our size, maybe 2.5 times their size, and they're really big. But like I said, the black lenses weren't on this creature. But when you're dazed like that, and I got up, the first thing I did was ask my ex-wife. I said, "Did you see or hear anything?" She goes, "No, go to sleep." Well, what happens when they're doing one person, or they're working on one person? The other person that's with you, they dumb them down. They make them go to sleep. Also, they do that to dogs too. They just make them go to sleep. That magnetic energy, I know how it feels. But I got up. My eyes were twitching. My eyelids were just really a nervous pattern twitching, and I got into the bathroom. I threw cold water in my face, and the eyes stopped twitching after about 20, 30 minutes. And then I finally got myself together. I tried to lay down, go back to sleep. I had to get up at 5 o'clock, so I didn't have much time then. And my adrenaline was flowing too much. So I just got up, went in the living room, watched TV until it was time for me to go to work. So I just kind of had to slip through that event.
Mm.
That's
Yeah,
scary.
that would be scary. Someone coming into your room and.
Well, yeah, it's a violation of two parts. Like, that's your safe space. You need to be able to feel safe, and then you don't necessarily remember exactly what happened. So then it's a physical violation as well.
Right. Well, they do dumb you down to the point where you think everything's okay. Don't grab a ball bat. Don't grab your pistol. Don't grab a camera. Just be still. Everything will be fine. We're just going to do a few little things, and then we're going to go. That's what the thinking that you have when these things are around you, and it's happened to me several times. So I know how that feeling is.
Mm.
You were going to say something?
There's a magnetic energy that causes this effect.
Yes, it actually works like an anesthetic. Actually, the more they give you, the more you go to sleep. And when they get close to you, even a hybrid has that ability to. And I'll explain that story a little later. But even a hybrid has that ability to kind of. They have this little device. I saw it at a convention, UFO convention, with two strange guys, and there was a little black device, looked like a little flashlight, and I think they use that as electromagnetic dumbing down a person to where you don't say anything, and either that or they can extract information from you or make you talk and tell them, it's kind of like a truth serum or electromagnetic energy. It also kind of makes you, you have a little nauseousness in your stomach. You feel warm, your body feels warm, and you feel like you're in a daze. You just feel like you drank about 6 beers or so, and you're just kind of like numb to the world, actually. And that's how they want you. They don't want you to be out of control.
Makes me wonder if that could also be their weapon. Like if they decide to turn it up all the way, is that a destroying device?
They have different degrees of their doses they give you. I'm just lucky that I just got the smaller dose. Well, I did get the doses that knocked me out and put me to sleep. So that's big. That's a larger dose than the dumbing down.
So you mentioned that you've always been kind of, you always used journaling. After these experiences, did you immediately write down what you saw, how you felt, all those things, or have you then later put this together?
To tell you the truth, I'm talking to you. I don't use any notes. I got a sheet here that goes way back in time, and it's a lot of smaller things, a lot of smaller paranormal happenings. And I don't talk about them because there wouldn't be enough time. I go into my events, the major events, and yes, I take notes, but I don't take them that morning or when I get up, or because these things are so embedded in my mind that I can't forget them. Everything I'm saying is from memory. I don't use notes. I don't copy from notes. I do have the ledger that's written, but I don't use it. So every once in a while, I'll say, okay, let me see if I can get that exact date, and I'll look in my ledger and find the exact date. But actually, for purposes of talking about the events, sometimes just the month and the year is basically, what we need to talk about, and what time of day it was, night or day. So those are things that I know that's what I remember. But yeah, if I can go into my notes, I get fine details, but I don't need that. I mean, once you see these things, you don't forget it. It's
I
just
imagine.
it's just like remember when John F. Kennedy, you guys probably don't remember, John F. Kennedy was shot and killed. I was in 7th grade, I believe, or 8th grade, and I remember that. I remember where I was at. I was in class, and it was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and the principal finally released us from school about 1:30, 2 hours early. So I remember that. I don't need notes for that. It's just like these UFO events. I don't need notes for things that happen to you that are extreme or that's way out of the natural. So yeah, that's how I remember things. They're burnt in my memory.
So that was your second. That was your second experience.
Yes, that was my second
With
direct.
little ones.
Right. I then in 2001. This was in '96. In 2001, I was working at the refinery, and I was the lead person. So I was checking all the equipment. I was up on a tower. It's about 14 stories up. And I was looking to the east, and here comes this bright, shiny little object moving really slow. And it was within the refinery property, but it was moving towards me. And I called down the control room, and I told the guys down there, I said, hey, you guys need to come up here and take a look at this. I said, you want to see a UFO? I think this is one right here. And then they laughed, and then they said, oh, there's Dave with that UFO stuff, because I told them I saw one earlier in the years. But this thing kept coming towards me. It was only probably, I'd say I was up maybe 100 feet high. This thing was up maybe 120 feet, 130 feet high, and was coming towards me. I couldn't make it out. And then when it got closer, it looked like a glider, about 15 feet long, and maybe had about a wingspan of 15 feet. And it didn't have a cockpit. It just had the two sharp wings, and then it had a tail rudder, a wing, and that's it on the back. But it wasn't moving. There wasn't any movable parts. There wasn't any bolts. There wasn't any screws. It was like it was poured from liquid stainless steel. The shining that it had. It looked like a stainless steel. I kept looking for the cockpit or somebody who's flying this thing, and I couldn't see nothing. There was nothing that I just looked at it in amazement, like I've done before. I've seen these things, and it passed by me, near me, and then it headed south. And then I went down and told the guys about it, and they laughed, of course. And then I started thinking, okay, this thing could not be a glider. A glider would not get close to a refinery. Number one, that'd be stupid for a glider to get close to any industrial complex. That'd be very dangerous. Number two, it's illegal for any plane or any device to fly over a refinery unless you have EPA clearance, or if you're working with the federal government, you have reason to fly over the refinery, then you have to have a license. But this was not a government or EPA thing. This was a strange craft that moved very slowly, and it was hiding itself or masking itself as a glider. They copy off of our aircraft.
So
I've heard.
You say it looked like, are you talking like the glider that people hang from, or more like the larger World War II style, or even these new solar powered gliders?
Well, this thing would be, no, it's not a solar power because there wasn't any panels on it.
But did it look like that, the long span, or did it look like the wedge shape that people glide under?
No, not necessarily. This looked like a glider without a cockpit or nothing. There's nothing. It was just solid metal. It looked like it's like a typical glider, like take a one-person glider.
Like wedge shape that people hang. No one's hanging, but it had that same distinct V shape to it.
No, well, I don't know about V-shaped. It was shaped like a small plane. It had two wings and a tail, a vertical tail wing, and that's all it had. It looked like a glider, but it wasn't a glider. It didn't have a cockpit. Didn't have no tail fins. I mean, the vertical fin was there. That was it. But the other two parallel back fins were not there. Had no lights. It was just completely like a piece of big metal. That's all it was.
Any sound? Any?
Nothing. No sound. Nothing. It was more or less like floating. It was floating, but moving about 25 miles an hour, pretty slow. And it come up and kind of took a good look at me. I looked up at it. I didn't think much about it, but there was actually uploading and downloading, because a couple of nights later, I had a very vivid dream, and I was walking through our refinery area, and I didn't hear any sounds. Usually it's really loud in the refinery. We have some big machinery there. And I walked through, no sounds, walked up to this big fan that we have, this circulating fan for the generator, and it was huge and loud. It was quiet, so I thought, oh, there's trouble. So I ran to the control room. Since I was the lead guy, I was in charge of making sure everything operates fine. But I ran to the control room, and there's usually 3 or 4 guys in there. There was nobody in there. The lights were all off. And the first thing come to my mind, I don't know why this is, but when you have a vivid dream, there's a message, and usually you can get it on your own. And the message told me that the plant is going to close. This plant will close. So the next day I told the guys about that dream, and they said, you're crazy. They just put $5 or $6 million into renovating this unit. I said, I don't know, guys, the plant will close. And they said, when? I said, 6 months, I believe. And it was 6 months to the day after I told them the plant closed. And I imagine a lot.
That was your first experience having like this premonition or premonition ability?
No, there was one with the USS Nimitz, in which is strange right now today. This happened back in the 90s, and I had a dream of jets colliding at the Nimitz, and it says it actually come through as Nemesis, but then I looked it up and I knew it was Nimitz. Well, the next day or two, there was 2 jets that collided on board the USS Nimitz. And so, yes, sometimes I get these psychic dreams, I call them. I don't like to say psychic, but I think these are things that are implanted from me. This metal object that looked like a little, I guess, glider. It gave me a little bone. It threw me a bone. It let me know the future. That means they were in my head uploading, but they also downloaded a piece of information for me. It's kind of like a tit for tat. They give you something.
So do you think that these visitors are like from our galaxy or from other dimensions, or you know, what kind of physical feeling do you get from them and where they're from?
All the above, Jared, what you just said. I believe they come through wormholes and from other galaxies. They come here. I believe that they're interdimensional. They actually come across dimensional wise. I also believe that they're here walking amongst us, and a lot of people are professing that right now. And I did run into one, and that's another big story. A hybrid. There's a lot of hybrids here on the planet. They're walking amongst us. I run into some strange people being involved in this UFO stuff, and I get to strange people hacking my friends' profiles on Facebook, and they come across as being somebody else. And they say things to me that kind of scare me, but I don't want to talk about it on the air. You know, we're all kind of, when you get to talking about things and a lot of people start knowing your stories, there's usually some people who either are telling you these things about being They mention all these alphabet type of agencies that go after people. So I don't even want to talk about that on the air. One thing I do say is that I have never seen our military involved with ETs or UFOs. Never. If I had, I'd probably say so, but I never have seen that. But that's the one thing that'll get most people in trouble, is that if they talk about the military being involved with UFOs, or they seen them with the aliens, you're going to be on a hot list. The other thing too is if you see a craft and you can make out all the details of it. I was told this by a guy I was in Alaska for a couple of years. My wife had a contract up there, and this guy told me, and he did a lot of I guess History Channel and Science Channel documentaries. He was a producer, and he said he's done a lot of things with UFOs, and he says that you can talk abductions all day, but when you start talking about craft and the details about these craft, he said that's the military don't like that. So I see the details. They're simple to me. I mean, but maybe to the military they may not be so simple. But
maybe
no,
they consider them a threat they don't understand.
Right. Yep. I think that's one reason why disclosure is not out there. The first thing is there's only about 45% of the people believe in UFOs, so they might be able to absorb the shock from disclosure. But there's probably 50+% out there that are into the old school and into the biblical sense of things, that there's nobody out there, and if somebody comes here, it's going to blow their theories all apart. It's not necessarily going to blow their theories apart. I wish they can understand that. When I say prayers, I say, God of gods. The ancients used to call the ETs gods. They're not gods. There is a God, and it's a source, and it's the consciousness of the universe is what it's all about. We're all connected. So there is a God, but the God of gods are aliens, and people should understand that. And I think that's one thing that when I go around and I talk about these things, I try to tell people, don't worry. There's a better place we go to, because I've actually been involved in a what you call a dimensional slip when I was abducted one time, that involved those things. But
when was this?
The abductions from
dimensional slip.
Yeah, 09, between 09 and 2012, there was an accelerated UFO contact with me, and the first one was when I went out to Sedona. This was 2010, and I had a fortune teller. She wasn't a fortune teller. She was a spiritual guide. She didn't call herself a psychic or anything, but she was a spiritual guide. And my buddy talked me into going to her, and he said, and he's a book writer. He writes books about ghost stories and his research in ghosts. And I went to her, and I sat there and I said, okay, I'm not into psychics too much. And she goes, I'm not a psychic. She got a little on point. And she says, sit down. And she sat down, and she started closing her eyes. And then she says, you have a bad back. I said, well, I'll give you that. I said, I probably walk a little hunched over coming through the door. I said, maybe I'll give you that. Yeah, I've had surgery. And then she said, then she closed her eyes again. And then she said, and the way she looked at me like she was in some kind of a daze, some kind of a fog. And she'd say, your car is going to be damaged on a trip, but you'll be able to finish your trip. And I said, wow, that's scary. And she said, no, it won't be. She closed her eyes again, and then she told me, you're going to meet your first alien October 4th. And then she asked me, when are you leaving for your trip? And I told her I was going on a trip. I didn't say when, but she gave that date of October 4th. I told her, I said, that's weird. And she goes, why? I said, I'm going to leave October 3rd, for Sedona, and I'm going to start then and then go see my friends in New Mexico. She goes, well, you'll meet your first alien. She said, good luck. And I did. This is really weird. story. One of my biggest stories, I think, even after seeing 5 up close UFOs, this is probably the biggest story that I can tell. I got there October 4th in Sedona, Arizona. I rested at the lodge. I usually go to the same lodge, and I rested there for a couple hours. Got up, went to this gift shop, and the gift shop people told me that they saw a UFO at Cathedral Rock. If you've ever been to Sedona and know what the different ones are, well, this is Cathedral Rock. And I said, oh, okay. So I got in my car and I take off up there. It was a little cloudy, a little cool. That makes Sedona not so beautiful when it gets cloudy and cool. But I went there, started filming with my camera, and in pulls behind me a little white car, and out jumps a Japanese young lady. But I guess she looked like she was in her early 30s or whatever. She walks up to me as I was filming, and she just stands there and was smiling at me with her hands behind her back. And then I put the camera down after I filmed her just a little bit, and I put the camera down, and I said, "Are you here waiting for hikers?" She goes, "No." I said, "Are you going to go hiking?" She goes, "No." And I said, "Okay, you come here for what?" She said, "We were supposed to meet."
Oh.
Yeah, and I said, "We were supposed to meet?" And she goes, "Yeah, we were supposed to meet." I said, "Why?" And she didn't say nothing. She had these dark, piercing eyes. And it was kind of, when she really laid them on you, it seemed like she can look into your mind and burn holes in the back of your head. But it started sprinkling, and I said, "Well, you want to get in my car and talk?" Because I was curious. Why were we supposed to meet? And I didn't even know her, So she sat in the car. I asked her, I said, "Are you afraid of being with a big old galoot like me?" And I said, "You're not afraid?" I said, "You can kick my butt." And she looks at me very strongly. She goes, yes, I can. And well, knowing some kind of capabilities that she had that dumbing down capability. And I felt like, okay, since I'm very hyper alert, I'm a combat veteran. And when I get into dangerous situations, I'll try to maneuver myself so where I can either get away from the dangerous situation or get the people with me away from it, or I'll be ready to approach it or do something to stop it. I'm kind of that kind of person where I would get close to somebody who's going to do harm to somebody and try to stop it. Not trying to be a hero, but just being a good person. And I think most combat veterans are kind of like that. But I sat there in the chair talking to her, and then here pulls in another car, just a parking space over from me. And I looked, and it looked like a young guy, short cropped hair. He had a headset on, and he did not turn. He did not look. I kept watching him. He didn't look either way, did not turn to me, because I tried to get a look at his face. But a lot of times, if they don't turn around a lot and they're looking straight, that means they're hiding themselves for some reason. So I sat there and I looked at her and I said, "Do you know him?" And she looks at me. She goes, No. And then we continue to talk, and she says she knows 20 languages. I said, 20? She said, yes. She said, I can speak English, but I can't read it, because she picked up a little card that was in my car, and she said, would you read that to me? I said, well, you can't read it, but you can. She said, yeah, I can speak, but I can't read. So maybe she's more familiar with symbols and not letters. That's my first thought, that she kind of was in the old ancient Egyptian type of communication.
Do you
But
think she was a full alien or a hybrid?
a hybrid. She was a hybrid, either that or she was a shapeshifter, and that
Okay.
could have been a gray shapeshifter. But from what I understand, since then, I found out that there has been Japanese ETs being seen coming out of UFOs. And I've heard a couple of those stories, and I've heard some stories in London, England, that there was Japanese ladies. So there has to be a race, could be a human race, and they're Asian, but they might be living under the ocean or underground and staying away from the general public. But they could exist as human Asians in the Asian race. But she kept trying to elicit emotional questions, answers from me. And she would say, I have a workmate who we always get into trouble with each other. She said, what should I do? I said, well, you should talk to her. Try to make peace. If you can't, just stay a distance because it's your job. You don't want to lose your job. And then she started crying, whimpering, and I put my hand on top of hers. And this is where Daryl Sims was telling me that he believes that she was a beginner in the hybrid race, and her frequencies were up too high. And that means that she had a lot of body temperature, and it was above fever pitch. It was really hot. Took my hand away, and I said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "It's cool outside, and you're a small young lady." She was about 5'4". She wasn't real little, but I told her, you shouldn't be that hot unless you're sick. So she looked at me funny, and then next to me, that car pulls back in with this young guy with a headset. Then I started getting a little nervous. If I was in my right mind, if I was in my what they call hyper alert combat mind, in which I do most of the time, I would have thought this was a setup. I would have thought that these two had a game plan and that they were going to rob me or take my car or whatever. But when she looked at me, she made me feel comfortable. Like, don't make a move. I had a license to carry a gun. I had a gun in my console, and I kept looking down at the console, and I put my hand on the lever to pull, to leave it there, maybe pull it up real fast in case something was going on. And she looked at the console the same time I did. And I looked at her, and I can tell she knew exactly what was in that console. And she knew exactly what I was thinking about doing, defending myself. And she looked at me again, and she made me feel like everything's fine. Just don't do anything. Everything's fine. You will be fine. So that's the feeling you get. It's kind of like a light magnetic energy that changes your characteristics to where you don't fight or you don't put up a hassle. They're there just to talk to you or meet you or even take samples. A lot of times that's not painful, but I looked around this guy and then I looked back at her. She's saying one of the things I noticed after this thing, I remember she shrunk down in the seat and she was small and her eyes got bigger. And I looked at her and I was kind of like, really shocked or surprised when I looked at her.
She shrunk down like she was scared of something?
No, she shrunk down maybe because I really don't know, but she shrunk down smaller and her eyes got bigger. And then she put that magnetic flux on me or whatever. And I just turned back around and I just kind of simmered down. Then when I looked at her again, she was setting back up straight. It was kind of like she was going back to her original size as a gray, and then
shifting,
shape shifting, yes, and then coming back. That's how she controlled her temperature, slowing her frequencies down. But then that car come back a third time, and after that, I didn't care.
The guy in it.
Yeah. He looked like some FBI or CIA agent or whatever. But from what I heard, these hybrids have 3 people that work with them. And I've actually talked to 2 human sponsors, one in Sedona. And she was a lady, an older lady, who sponsors hybrids. And she said that she has sponsored several in Sedona. And I asked her about this one. She didn't know this one. But she said that it's common. She said they'll come to her. And what they do is the sponsor kind of takes care of them, directs them what to do, takes them to the store, shows them how to get around in the human society, and then they have the security person. That person, I don't know if it could be U.S. government, maybe, who knows, or it's one of their security people. So I can't really tell, but it all seemed to match up because. We were on top of airport lookout one day. Her and I were standing up there, and there was an older Japanese fellow. He was loaded with cameras and everything, and he had a jacket on, and he walked past us, and he just stared at me. And I thought there's a connection between him and this young lady that I was with, Hiroko. And I turned to her and I asked her, I said, why didn't you say hi to him? He's Japanese. She goes, we don't do that. She said, that'd be embarrassing. I said, what? Some strange things actually come out of her mouth that I took notes on. Now, you talk about notes. That night, after we left each other about 9:30 that night. She got in that car that she had, and I got in mine, went back to the lodge. And when I got back to the lodge, I took notes. I took notes because this was a different type of situation. It was things that she asked, things that she said that didn't make sense. And mind you, there is women, and you know this, that women, especially young women, she didn't have no earrings, no jewelry, no watch, no purse, no makeup, and then she had a splash of mud on her pants. She had denims, and she had a thin white sweater. Actually, I was able to take 9 pictures of her while we were there. And the next day, yeah, what's that?
Is there anything that stands out on her that's different than like a normal person?
Aside from everything you just mentioned,
well, yeah,
young women have earrings, have makeup, have necklaces, have watches, have purses.
Yeah.
But does the Japanese culture have that? I mean, is there anything different? Her eyes a little bit larger, maybe her ears are a different shape, maybe.
Yeah, physical.
No, her eyes were dark. They were black. They
all
were
black?
Just almost all black. There were some white people there, but not much. But when she stared at me and she gave me that look, her eyes were even stronger and and a little darker. Yes, that part of it. Her skin, it was kind of, I don't know how you would say it, kind of a little roughish like on her face. And I don't know if that was, I don't know if that was anything that was different about her, but I kissed her on the cheek goodbye. And I kind of felt like somebody asked me, and somebody got into it. This guy was I guess you could say he was actually against us UFO experiencers and tried to disprove a lot of things. And he said that was a romantic situation, wasn't it? I said, no, it wasn't. From the very start, it wasn't romantic. I kind of took her as my daughter, to tell you the truth.
Oh my goodness.
I thought she was kind of my daughter. The next day we went and we went to breakfast, and she was standing there, and they call it it's a 100 omelet restaurant there in Sedona. Everybody goes there for breakfast. I went there with her, and there was about 12 people standing around in the shop waiting for a seat. And she looks around and she says, all these people. And she told me she was from Tokyo. Well, in Tokyo, you got several million people on the streets and it's so crowded, it's, I said, that was strange. So there's some strange remarks that she made. And the other thing was too, she could have been, I guess, a too, how do you call it? A too sexual entity, because she didn't look like a woman up here in the chest area, to tell you the truth. She was like a young boy. I mean, she was kind of like a
androgynous.
Yeah. So that was kind of weird, but she was female. She talked female, and she said to me she had to have a baby. And I said, you have to have a baby? She goes, yes. And I said, are you married? She goes, no. She said, I got a boyfriend, but we don't get along too well. And she says, but I need a baby. I said, why do you need a baby? And I got to thinking, I said, well, and my mind worked right away, because since I've had these UFO connections, my mind took me to the place where it says she is gathering semen for a baby, and should they pick certain types of people? I guess there's a aura that we all carry, and they said that the hybrids can see this aura, and they pick out. But she knew me, but I didn't know her, because she said we were supposed to meet. She said it again the next day. We drove around, looked at a couple other buttes, and she got out and she heard the wind whistling and stuff, and she said, this is beautiful. I said, yeah, it is. And then she told me she went to White Sands in New Mexico. I said, by yourself? She goes, yeah. And I said, why'd you go there? She said, to see the sand. I said, to see the sand.
Just keep going. I got to step away for a minute, but just
Okay.
keep telling Betsy the story.
So how much time did you spend with her?
I spent about over 2 hours that evening with her in the car. And then the next day I spent maybe 4 hours with her that next day until before she left.
So that alone sets this experience apart, because who just meets someone and spends that amount of time with them?
Right. Especially a young lady and an older man. I mean, that's
Just a complete stranger.
yeah. And
So you said she felt familiar?
yes, when somebody said that was a romantic interlude, I said, no, it wasn't. I said, no. I said, I didn't even think of it that way. I said, I thought of her as somebody that I knew. And I had somebody it was at a convention one time, and it was in the Arkansas UFO convention, Eureka Springs. I went there after I met her. That was when was it? April 2011. And I walked past this gal, and she told me, she said, come here. And I said, no, I don't want a psychic reading. I don't, she was into the readings and everything. She goes, no, I want to talk to you. I said, what about? She goes, you've had an experience, haven't you? I said, yeah, I've had several. She goes, no, you had an experience just here lately. I said, yeah, last fall. And this was spring of 2011 afterwards. And she goes, she said, don't tell me. She said, I know the person you ran into. It was a young lady, and she was Oriental. I said, yeah, how'd you know that? She goes, I know. And I said, how? And then she looked at me. She said, do you know who that was? She said, it had a chin like you, had cheekbones like you. She said, she didn't see the picture. I didn't even show her the picture. And I said, I can show you the picture. She said, I don't need it. She said, that's your daughter. I said,
my goodness.
yeah. So I've had several people say that. And I thought, and, with the pictures and stuff that I've got, I believe what happened was some years back, they took semen samples from me, and she turned out to be one of the hybrids that got my donation, I guess you could call. So she said it the next day again. She needed a baby and all this other stuff. And then she left about 3:00 of that day, and it started raining and it was looking ugly in Sedona. So I went ahead and checked out to take off. And then I had another dimensional experience at that time. There was an old guy, looked like he had a cowboy hat on, and he was dressed like an old Westerner back in 1880. He was in a rocking chair, and I was getting in my car. It was raining a little bit. And he said, I wouldn't go if I was you. I said, what do you mean not going? He said, I wouldn't go if I were you. He said, I'd stay another night. And I said, well, it's rainy, it's ugly here. And he goes, don't do it. And I said, well, the weather forecast said everything's going to be fine. It's going out west. It turned out that year in 2010 that was the first time that Arizona had 5 tornadoes. And I left for Flagstaff, north of Sedona, and I got on Highway 40, and I was starting to head out. And then this huge, I guess, rotating cloud was above me, and I got hit by huge hail, and it was just beating my car up really bad. I thought the windshield was going to shatter. And that's what the gal was talking about when she said you would have car damage, but you'd be able to finish your trip. And that's exactly, yeah, she was 100% right. And she was 100% right of me meeting that alien on the 4th. So this gal is super. I've never been told things like that. And these things are kind of like way out. You would never think about it. Your car being damaged, but being able to finish your trip, and you'd run into an alien on the 4th of October. So that was a phenomenal spiritual shot. I went back to her and I said, my God, you were so correct. I said, I took my brother to her and he talked to her. So I said, I just come here to say, you were really good. I said, I can't believe the things that you said, and they come true. I would have never guessed it. Matter of fact, I was kind of laughing and chuckling when I walked out the door, but to find out that the truth come later. But here's the story on her. I was telling you guys that I usually have to have secondary facts to back up some event or any event. Well, I got that March 17th, 2011. My cousin and I was sitting on my front porch in Godfrey, Illinois, and here comes 3 Asians. And my cousin said, "Those are Chinese." I said, "No, those are Japanese." And they were about 200, 250 feet away from my porch to the road. Well, the 2 young guys kept coming towards us, but the gal turned and folded her arms just like that Hiroko, the gal I ran into in Sedona. And I knew it was her. I knew it was her. And these 2 young guys come up, and they was about 10 feet away from us. They stood on the driveway, and my cousin and I was sitting there, and they asked me one question. They said, "Where's the new Walmart?" I said, "Just over this overpass." I said, "Just about a quarter mile away." And then they stood there and they looked at us, and I didn't say another word. Neither did my cousin. This was being dumbed down. This is what they did to us. They dumbed us down. We didn't talk. The words, I wanted to ask questions because that's what I do. I ask a lot of questions sometimes. I was going to ask them. I said, that's Hiroko down the road there, right? It didn't come out. I couldn't get it out. They had us both, and my cousin was sitting there, and I looked around at him, and he was sitting there in a daze. And usually he's a real big talker. When somebody comes up, he'll talk to them and he'll ask them questions. He'll joke around with them. It never fails, but he never said a word. And I noticed him not saying a word, and I also noticed me not being able to say anything or carry a conversation. The next thing I noticed was the taller of the 2 young guys. They were 15, 16, maybe 17 years old. And the taller one, the older one, must have went in and got my little pleather attaché case in which I kept my UFO notes in. He was out there, and I was looking at him. He looked at me, and he was running through that notebook. And he knew I had notes, I guess, on his mom. I would say it was his mom, and they were my grandkids by hybrid. And so they must have took it back in, because I looked for it as soon as I come out of it, went back in the house, and I looked for it, and it was there. He put it right back where it usually is at. But then before that, though, they walked away. The 2 young boys walked away. They got to my mailbox, in which is probably 100 feet away, and they got to the street, and I saw them there. But my cousin didn't see them until they rejoined with the female, or Hiroko. And he saw them when they joined there. He said, "Did you see them leave?" I said, "Yeah, I saw them when they got to the road." And he said, "I just now saw them." I said, "You were out of it, buddy." And he says, he's out of it. I said, "Yeah, I'll explain to you." And we kept watching them. They went up to the stop sign about 250 feet away. They were standing there, and we turned our heads just briefly and we looked back out there, and they were gone. They wasn't walking up and down the road, up or down the road. You didn't see them anywhere, and there wasn't a car that picked them up.
So do you think that they got, I don't know what means they enter their craft, but do you think that they maneuvered in that way?
No, they were beamed up. I mean, they can disappear. That's how they disappear. They just beam them up. And so I've seen other people that disappeared on me that were staring at me, and I would follow them around a corner and they'd be gone. My brother was with me on one incident, but my cousin, he got up after that incident, and he started saying, "My God," he said, "you and them damn ETs." And I said, "You noticed ET?" He said, "Yes." "My God," he said, "I couldn't say nothing." He said he was pale white as a ghost. And he said, "I'm getting out of here." He said, "I've had enough of this shit," he said. So he gets in his truck and he takes off.
Your cousin doesn't want to hang out with you anymore.
Yeah, well, he did, but he wanted to get away from that situation. I guess he's scared they're going to come back. I told him, I said, they wouldn't be back. I said, they'll just show up and they'd be gone. And the next day I talked to his wife, and she said, "David, what did you do to him?" I said, "I did nothing to him." I said he saw something that I'm familiar with. I said, ETs. I said, this whole thing. She said, "Oh, you and those ETs." He said, "But he did see something, and he was scared to death." and he said he couldn't talk about it for a while. So we were at lunch one day, my brother and him, and we were talking about certain things going on, and he said something about. He said, "Yeah, that was weird." He said about those Japanese, and I said, "Yeah, it was weird." And my brother looked at him. He said, "Welcome to the world of ETs," because my brother's a firm believer, and he's seen some things, not close up, but at a distance. But he believes, my whole family does, because most all of them have seen UFOs. And my mom has been through some incidents that I didn't know about. She just started talking about it the last few years, I guess, when she saw me opening up about the subject of UFOs. And she said that she's had tall, dark, thin men come into her room, and this has been years back or whatever, and she said they would molest her. I said, "My God, Mom." I said, "What? Wait." She said, "No." She said, "It's nothing I can say or prove," but she said, "I've seen these things before." And she said, "Then I had a dream." Her mom, my grandma, died back in the mid-70s, and she said she had a dream of a little gray thing walking hand in hand with my grandma, her mom. And she said that this little gray thing brought her up to her, and they just said hi to each other and said love you, and then she said it was gone. But she's had, and my sister's had experiences, and she's passed. She passed in '07, somewhere in there. But my family has had, we talk about bloodline and why they do things. Well, that's the possibility that my whole family and my grandparents and my aunts have been involved, and they've seen things. So it does travel in family lines.
We've heard that.
Yeah.
We've heard that with both extraterrestrial and paranormal experiences, is that there's a genetic link with that type of contact.
Right.
I'm glad I don't have that genetic link. I'm glad.
Well, people ask me, have you had experience lately? And I said, no, little things happen, little thumps or whatever. My wife, I've been married to over 7 years now, and she believes me. She's an academic, and usually they don't, they have put a box over their head when it comes to pseudoscience. So, but she's got a master's, but she's learned through me that these things exist, and she's always looking up when we're driving, and she's actually seen two of them with me. That we could actually saw one that come down through the clouds. It was a triangle, and then it stayed under the cloud, and then it went back up. And my wife asked me, "You saw that, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "That was a UFO," and I said, "Yeah, sure was." And so she's familiar with them, and she's always been afraid that they're going to come around. Actually, she had a scoop mark on her back. It was about 1 inch long, and the dermatologist couldn't figure out what it was. It wasn't any rash. It wasn't any. It's not the typical scratch that you'd see. It was about, I guess, 3/4 of an inch wide and about 1 inch long, and it's right there at her back. It looked like a skin scrape. Well, it turned brown. It took a while for it to disappear, but now I think it's pretty much disappeared. And she showed several doctors, and I took several pictures, and I've had marks on my legs and stuff that I've taken pictures of that I don't remember, being in a briar patch anytime at that age. I didn't do that kind of stuff. So the marks meant something more to me. I've actually felt these things touch me in bed. My wife has too, that they grabbed like her arm or her leg, and they've actually done that to me. They've grabbed my arm, and then one time they pulled my foot down to the point where it almost hurt. And I think what they do is they wake you up after they're done with you. They make sure that they don't kill you with what they do.
Spank the baby after birth.
Right.
Yeah.
Basically, and that's what a lot of people say, that they feel these touches, or they shifting around and sitting on a bed, solid object. Well, that was after that in 2010. I had 3 abduction experiences. The first one, I was laying in bed, and it was 10:30, and I felt like I had pneumonia. I was going to go to the doctor the next morning, and I had my hand out off the bed, and I was I must have been at least 4 feet away from any electrical appliance, a light or a alarm clock or whatever. And I had my hand out, and I just about ready to fall asleep, and I felt this big shock on my index finger. Yeah, I felt it blew. I thought it blew it off. It hurt, and I turned the light on, and I looked at it. It was okay. It was fine. But that was part of an abduction situation. But then the next day I went to the doctor and I took an x-ray and they said, your lungs are clear. So maybe it could have been a healing thing. They talk about that sometimes that ETs can actually heal you in some of the things that they do. But then this was a huge abduction. The other abductions I've had is I was put to sleep. I didn't know really what happened. But this one that happened in February of 2012, I believe, or was it? Yeah, no, it was 2011. Right. It was after the Hiroko thing. And I was in my office and I was typing on the computer and I got really tired. And this is also a sequence of most people, what happens to them when they get abducted. I felt really tired, like I had to lay down. So I went to my bed. It was about 1:30 in the afternoon. The sun was shining really bright. I mean, it was a nice day. So I laid down to rest my back, and I put my hand in my chin, and I leaned on it, and I was just kind of laying there. I was wide awake, and then I heard a snap and crackling beside me in my bed. It sounded like you taking a big box of crackers and just stomping on them. It's like a static shock, really loud. And that real loud noise alarmed me, and I started turning around to take a look at it, and then it hit me in the shoulder, and then I was paralyzed. It was a strong shock, and I tried to turn again, and it hit me again, and then I couldn't move at all. I mean, I was basically out of it. I can move my eyes, I can see out the door, and my hand was up in the air, and I felt, I heard my sister say, "Come on, Dave, you can do it. Come on, Dave." And I said, "Do what, sissy?" That's what I called her. I said, "Do what?" She said, "You can do it." I said, "Come to the door so I can see you. I can't see you." She said, "I can't come to the door." I said, "Yes, please come to the door where I can see you." Now, mind you, she was dead 4 years before that incident. So this was kind of like a spiritual thing that come through this dimensional opening that the ETs created. Well, going back to this Hiroko thing.
Do you think that was her, or do you think it was the ETs mimicking?
Good question. I've always said that they can reach in your mind and pull out video recordings, audio recordings from your brain. We record things that we don't even realize that we can regress or whatever, but they can do it. They can pull them out. You're definitely right. It's one of the things I talk about too, that either they were masking this whole situation and they were using my sister's voice to I guess either, I don't know, to scare me or to control me. Maybe control me, to let me know that they have control of the whole situation. Well, my hand was in the air and I could just move my tips of my fingers, and then there was a baby's hand that dropped into my hand, and I felt the fingers. I pulled down on the fingers, and then I felt the palm, and I pulled down on the palm, and I thought, that's a baby's hand. That's real. And then I laid there. I said, okay, what's next? I didn't know. I was really scared at that point. And then something heavy sat beside me at my waistline, and the bed kind of sunk down, and it was a solid person, whatever. And then that's when I lost it. I jumped up out of the bed and I said, "Oh, God, help me!" And it was all gone. Yeah.
Scary.
Do you think that you felt all that and it was there? Do you think that maybe you had lost time before you jumped up out of bed, or do you think that they had put the impression in your mind?
Okay, what happened? I talked to Dr. Jacobs at this convention one time, and I told him, I said, I think I escaped some of the abductions. I told him about the electrical shock. He kind of laughed. He looked at me and said, "You didn't escape it." He said, "They were bringing you back." He said, that's when they bring you back, when you feel those static shocks and you get shocked and you're in your bed. And he said they're done with you. And he said, and I said, wow, at least I have an answer. That's what I look for, the puzzles, what's going on and why they do what they do. But then I had another experience. It would just happen 2 weeks after that, and it started on my shoulder again, and then I pushed it away. I kept pushing. I heard the shock, and I pushed it, and I said, wow, this time I stopped it. And Dr. Jacob said, no, you didn't. He said, they're done. They're done. Whatever happened to you, they did it before the shocks, and the shocking effect is when they bring you back. And I thought, okay, all right, that's weird to know all that kind of stuff. But then I think at that time in 2011, 2012, I saw my third UFO up close. I went to Springfield, Illinois to listen to a band of people that I know.
Spectrums.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm getting hardwired today, and Spectrum is here to hardwire my computer, so everything will work better.
If we need to if we need to stop this here, we can come back. We can do another interview again.
Sure, yeah. We can finish up.
We
Yeah,
gotta cut loose.
yeah. I didn't think this was gonna be here till 3. I figured we had at least 2 hours, but they're here. They're here a little early, so.
Okay, well we'll plan it. We'll plan another one. That's been a great interview.
Right.
A lot of information. A lot of in-depth information. Like
I know I have more details that I can talk about. I can go on after 3 hours actually, but it's those incidents that happen, all the way from being doppelganged and doubled. That happened to me too out in New Mexico. So I have a lot more stories that they're not stories, they're actual events that I can talk about.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely schedule another one, Dave. Thanks again for coming on. That's a lot of information. I wrote down 4 pages of notes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know I talked that fast.
Yeah, lots of. Well, I synopsis of notes, just rough notes, and then I'll have to go back and re-listen and revisit. But this has been really good. So yeah, we'll schedule you to come on again here in a couple weeks to a month or so, and
sure,
and get it going. Thanks again.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you very much, and
Yes.
have a good day.
You have a
too.
wonderful day yourself.
I guess you can call this a technical problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Technically, we
But to
can.
be hardwired in a computer is great for Zoom and great for
Oh,
Skype. Yeah. So
makes everything work so much better.
right. Alrighty. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. You have a good.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.